Welcome and good evening. My name is Barbara Cooper and I'm the chair of the Fidalgo Democrats. Thank you for coming and welcome. I also want to thank Transitions Fidalgo and Evergreen Islands for helping get the word out about this meeting. I'd like to start the meeting with an acknowledgement. We, the Fidalgo Democrats, acknowledge that we gather on indigenous land, the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Samish and Swinomish people, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. If you're not on a mailing list, please sign in. It's on the table in the back there. Please put your email and your phone number. And then you will be sent the flyers about our meetings. I'd like to remind everybody to please turn off your cell phones. And as I say, if you don't know how to do it, your neighbor will. Your front door is locked, so if you want to leave, it's this door and that door. The bathrooms are around the side to your left when you go out that door over there. There are some lovely cookies in the back. We also have some coffee and tea, decaf, and you're welcome to that. Thank you, Rita Sullivan. Yay for Rita. Yummy cookies. The Fidalgo Democrats are an independent democratic association with a focus on education. I want to remind everyone that we are not a PAC. We cannot endorse candidates or contribute to their campaigns. We do invite Democratic candidates to talk about issues and legislation. If you want to contribute to candidates, we encourage you to go to their websites. We don't charge dues, but we will pass the hat at some point. The meeting is being recorded by Tarn Ohana, who is the PCO of 222, and will be available on YouTube in a few days. Thank you. If you came earlier, we had a slideshow from John Jansen. He takes pictures of the demonstrations, and Sarah set up her computer, and off we went. Our next meeting is going to be an interesting meeting. It's Tuesday evening, September 9th at the library, 7 to 9. It will be a forum, and there'll be the 4 candidates that are running for the 2 city council seats have all said they're available to come. So you can come and learn more about the candidates. Shay Schulberg will be the moderator again, and she's great at that. So it will be really interesting. And we'll send out a flyer closer to the event, but just be aware of that. I'm just going to quickly say a few thank yous, and then we're going to move on. Thank you to the current editors of the weekly Skagit Democrats newsletter. If you don't get that, it's worth getting. There's also a newsletter, Whidbey Island newsletter. So if you live in the 10th and are interested in that, that's also comes out once a month. The Skagit comes out weekly. Also to let you know, Sarah Peterson with Anacortes Stands Up, thank you Sarah, has been very much the organizer of the demonstrations. We have a Sunday rally from 12 to 1 and then a Wednesday rally from 12 to 1.
That's tomorrow.
Which is tomorrow. Okay. And we've moved to, because of the construction at Safeway area, we're on Commercial and 32nd. All are welcome. There's lots of extra signs, and you can pick and choose. The back table, there's just some resource information, and if people who are campaigning or running want to leave stuff, we have it on the back there. Right before we start, I want to ask if there are any elected officials, people running for office. No, come on, stand up. Introduce yourself real quick.
Hi, I'm Carrie Carroll, and I'm running for court position number 1.
Thank you. Are there any other candidates that I'm missing here? Okay, any Democratic Party officials or PCOs? So you want to introduce yourself? Stand up.
Oh, howdy, I'm Tarno Hana. I'm from the 222, which is out in the West Streets in Rock Ridge.
Good.
Sarah Peterson, and 26.
Okay, and Rita?
Rita Sullivan, Skyline 224.
Okay. All right. Thank you for being so involved. Tonight we have two speakers, Julie Hurd and Eddy Ury. What I'll do is I'll start with Julia and then I'll read more information about you, Eddy. So, Julia is a retired draftsperson and executive secretary with time to spend on nuclear non-proliferation and gun violence prevention, as well as her family. On the steering committee for the local groups No More Bombs and Safe and Sane Skagit. A little later, she's going to hand out a place for you to sign up if you're interested in helping with either of these organizations. So, okay, we're going to start. Okay, here's a good mic.
Hello? Okay. So I'm going to talk a bit about Safe and Sane Skagit and about No More Bombs. And I'll provide some background about both and talk a little bit about legislation around both. So Safe and Sane Skagit, or SAS, which I'll probably call it, began in 2016. And in that short time, we've seen a lot of changes. Initially, we received jeers and nasty comments when picketing, and lawmakers didn't want to touch any gun safety legislation at the state or federal level. As a reminder, 3 of the biggest gun violence stories in Skagit County include 2 mass shootings, one in Alger in 2008 that ended after a high-speed chase down I-5. 6 people were killed, including a sheriff's deputy, and 2 people were injured. Then there was the Cascade Mall shooting in 2016 when 6 people died. And then there was the Kessel Ring gun shop, named by the Seattle Times as one of the worst gun retailers in the U.S., one year earning a nefarious $14 million in profits with over 2,400 guns unaccounted for. It was shut down by the ATF in 2013. Okay. After countless mass shootings that make headlines, from Sandy Hook Elementary in 2013 to Pulse in 2016 to Parkland in 2018, and way too many suicides that don't make headlines, things have changed. The public got fed up with lack of action at the federal level, so it became up to the states to do something, and Washington has been doing something. We're now rated A- by the Giffords Law Center. They rate all the states in terms of their gun violence prevention laws. Now gun violence is seen as a public health crisis, with Biden's Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, naming it as such in 2024. The firearm industry and the stunningly successful lobbying industry no longer hold their sway. The dialogue has changed. Many lawmakers nationwide and in Washington state endorse firearm safety. Some of you may have attended a meeting here last January when Hazel and Alex from the Alliance for Gun Responsibility presented. The Alliance is a statewide organization, the most responsible for safety laws passed in Washington since Sandy Hook. SAS is a chapter team of the Alliance. We work to support their annual policy agendas. Their priorities come out in December, so we don't yet know what the focus will be for 2026. There have been several major wins this year, and in the past, like the 7 years in the making assault weapons ban that passed in 2023, raising the age to 21 to purchase high-capacity firearms, and banning ghost guns. SAS worked on legislation to create a first-in-the-nation Office of Firearm Safety and Violence Prevention in 2020. A similar White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention was created under President Biden and was immediately shut down by the current president. We benefited from the office in Washington through a grant that provides free safety devices, and through this program, SAS has given away around 350 firearm lock boxes and 150 trigger locks at various events around the county. And now we're waiting to see if the program will be funded in the 2025-27 budget. This year's big legislative win was a comprehensive permit to purchase. It's good for 5 years and requires passing a background check before the sale rather than at the point of sale, passing a certified training course, fingerprinting, 10-day waiting period, annual rechecks by the State Patrol Firearms Background Check Program. Prior to this, background checks were provided by a hodgepodge of different entities, which wasn't good for record keeping, but that was another bill that we worked on to get the State Patrol to be the one entity to collect background checks. Another bill that passed this year requires firearm dealers to report trace requests, which helps law enforcement in investigations. The proposed legislation that didn't pass this year includes restrictions on firearms in parks and public buildings, limiting bulk firearm sales, a tax on firearms and ammunition, and more. But currently firearms are restricted in schools, courthouses, airports, government buildings, bars, and child care facilities. There's still more work to do, especially in light of the current administration tearing things down and making dreadful promises in the midst of an ongoing national crisis. So now I'll talk about no more bombs. Nuclear weapons are a huge topic, and I hardly know where to begin. It's so big that it's barely been on anyone's radar until recent times with all the threats and uncertainty. So maybe it's gaining ground, although for generations under 40 years old, it's still a non-topic. We need more public outcry, similar to the protests during the height of the Cold War, that resulted in major achievements and groundbreaking treaties. From the Limited Test Ban Treaty in 1963 to the Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1970 that 190 nations signed, including all nuclear-armed states except India, Pakistan, and Israel, and then North Korea pulled out. There was a SALT treaty in 1972 when the US and Russia agreed to talk, and the START Treaty in 1991 that actually reduced nuclear weapons in the US and Russia by about 80%. That was huge. So this is when the nuclear freeze movement was strong, and Skagit, Whatcom, and San Juan counties became nuclear-free zones. The Skagit County Ordinance reads, the development, testing, transportation, deployment, storage, manufacture, or usage of nuclear weapons is prohibited. Nuclear weapons are not only a big topic, they're a complicated topic. Being an international issue and being more life-threatening than the climate crisis, it's also a very local problem. Washington State is one of the most heavily militarized and most heavily invested states in the US in nuclear weapons. Not only do we house the Kitsap Bangor submarine base with 8 of the 14 nuclear submarines in the US, and as the Federation of American Scientists write, the payload of 5 Trident submarines is equal to more than 25 times the total explosive force for all munitions used in World War II. This base is, as the crow flies, 20 miles from Seattle, so could be a target. And there is Naval Station Whidbey, Naval Station Everett, Manchester Fuel Depot at Bangor, which is the largest military fuel depot in the U.S., sometimes called the Pentagon's gas station. The Jim Creek Radio Station for nuclear submarines, the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Laboratory, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Boeing's weapons manufacturing, and 2 Superfund cleanup sites, Hanford, that produced the plutonium used to bomb Nagasaki, and it's the largest nuclear waste dump in the Western Hemisphere. And then there's the Midnight Mine on the Spokane Tribe Reservation. Then there are populations of tribes, farmers, workers, and everyday people in Washington state that have been directly negatively affected by our nuclear industry. More Bombs, No More Bombs is a small group, but we've been active. We're a coalition member of Northwest Against Nuclear Weapons, which is possibly the only such coalition in the U.S., along with around 60 other groups and organizations. In 2019 and 2020, the Skagit and the 40th Legislative District Democrats passed no first use resolutions at our request. On Earth Day this year, April 22nd, the town of O'Connor unanimously passed a Back from the Brink resolution as part of a national campaign. No More Bombs worked closely with a council member to make this happen. It's the first town in Washington state to pass this kind of resolution. And a similar resolution was introduced to the Bellingham City Council last night. This resolution includes policies in legislation that I will describe in one of the bills that I'll talk about in a minute. Other cities that have taken action are Olympia, Friday Harbor, and Walla Walla, who passed resolutions supporting the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which has been signed by over 120 countries, none of the nuclear-armed countries, and it came into effect in 2021. We hear threats of limited nuclear war, which is impossible. Russia suspending participation, partial participation in the New START treaty. The U.S. is threatening likewise, the U.S. bombing Iran, the war in Ukraine, the nightmare in Israel and Gaza, the U.S. rebuilding or modernizing every aspect of its nuclear triad at great expense with funds that could be used elsewhere. Arms control processes are collapsing, disinformation is happening. This all makes the international nuclear landscape more bleak than ever. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists have set the doomsday clock that measures global nuclear risk at 89 seconds to midnight, the closest it's ever been. This summer was the 80th anniversary of Trinity that brought us into the nuclear age, as well as the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We've been lucky these last 80 years, but how long will our luck hold out? With this in mind, there are 2 companion resolutions in both the House and Senate to take action on. We need to ask Representative Larson and Senators Cantwell and Murray to let them know that they have constituents that are opposed to nuclear weapons and ask them to co-sponsor these resolutions. One is HRES 317 and the Senate is HRES 323. I've written it on the board in the back, but the title is Urge the United States to Lead a Global Effort to Halt and Reverse the Arms Race. The House version was introduced in April and the Senate just in July. A nuclear-free world is a matter of national security. The notion of nuclear deterrence is outdated. The U.S. was the first to develop and drop the bomb, and as a leader should lead the effort to reverse the nuclear arms race and plan an economic transition for the civilian and military workforce. No More Bombs signed onto a letter that was delivered to all House members in support of this resolution on July 15th, the day before the Trinity test. The basic points in both resolutions implore the United States to, there's 6 points: pursue nuclear disarmament as a national security imperative with checks. Renounce the first use of nuclear weapons. We still have a policy that we can use them first. And sole presidential authority to launch a nuclear weapon. Cancel plans for new enhanced nuclear weapons and delivery systems that we're spending, 1.6, I've heard so many different numbers on revamping all of our nuclear weapons in the US. Maintain the moratorium on nuclear testing and support and advance a just economic transition for impacted communities. Pramila Jayapal is the only co-sponsor from Washington State for this bill. Then the second one, resolution, is HRES 100 and Senate Resolution 61, and the name of this one is expressing support for the continued value of arms control agreements and negotiated constraints on Russian and Chinese strategic nuclear forces. Both resolutions were introduced in February. Adam Smith and Pramila Jayapal are co-sponsors. The Senate version only has one co-sponsor, and that is Jeff Markley from Oregon. The New START treaty expires in February 2026. If it expires, there will be no nuclear treaty between the US and Russia on arms control. In the face of Russia's aggressive nuclear stances and China's nuclear buildup and all the dangers this implies, we need to renew the treaty with its historic commitment to arms control and the need to reduce global nuclear arms. We need renewed engagement with Russia and China. So you can find information on both of these bills on our website, the No More Bombs website, which is nomorebombs.com. It's on the home page, and you can write or call or fill out one of their online forms, or just click on, there's Physicians for Social Responsibility and a Back from the Brink action links that you can just fill out. I'd like to thank our webmaster, Bill Johnson over here in the orange shirt, for helping with the websites for both. He does a website for both No More Bombs and for Safe and Sane Skagit. And that's it. Thank you. Maybe I should recognize other members from our group that are here. Jackie and Bud and Kathleen. Yeah. So,
Julie's gonna.
Julie is going to hand out, pass around.
I'll just pass these around. I don't have a pen.
Oh, there's pens in the back there.
I get a pen.
That's fine.
If anybody wants to sign up for our newsletters or, yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was informative, and the one optimistic part of all of this is there are actions that we can take, and we don't have to feel helpless like there's nothing we can do. And so I appreciate you mentioning things that we as citizens can do to be involved with these kind of issues. So thank you, and thank you all for all you do. You know, there's so much going on that sometimes things that are super important get forgotten. But this is very important. So thank you. Okay, at the end, I'm going to, we can ask questions of Julie if you have some, so hold them, because we're going to move on now. And there's Eddy, he's wandering around. Hi, Eddy. And Eddy Ury is going to take over the meeting now. And I'm going to read a little bit about him. He is the Climate and Energy Policy Manager at RE Resources, a place-based organization dedicated to protecting the people and ecosystems of Northwest Washington. He also serves as Commissioner for Public Utility District Number 1 of Whatcom County, as well as a member of Whatcom County's Climate Impact Advisory Committee. His work focuses on municipal regulatory reform to guide industrial development for critical energy infrastructure, upholding environmental protection while advancing decarbonization, safety, and resiliency for local communities. Eddy will present a current state of affairs for energy policy in 2025, highlight the near-term opportunities for Fidalgo residents to help shape our future through engagement in upcoming county and city legislative processes. And I'm going to let you take over and talk more about the things that you want to share with us. Get out of your way. Here you go.
Thank you, Barbara and Julia. It's been a while since I was here with this group. Thank you all for coming out tonight, for having me, and taking the time to come share space, listen to what I have to say. I think I did present to Fidalgo Dems about 10 years ago, when I was 4 years old. Back then we were the big thing we were worried about was the entry of oil trains coming out of the North Dakota fracking boom, making their way into Washington for the first time. It just started about 2013 when the refineries started getting permitted to bring those in. The Shell refinery was the last one to apply for permits, and it was after this big explosion happened in Canada that killed 47 people and really brought attention to the whole thing of what had been warned about before they started coming, that there was a high risk of that. There was about a dozen more explosions that year. They happened to be caught in their permitting process while all that was going on, and I think that was what I was here to talk about, most likely. We were also fighting a big coal terminal proposed for Cherry Point, the largest ever proposed in North America. That was one of about, 7 terminals proposed in the Pacific Northwest, none of which were built.
Yay. Yay.
That's all the rest. Julia actually was involved in that too, and I have fond memories of us tabling together at the Anacortes Farmers Market back around that time. But it was really a whole other era, the 20-teens, wasn't it? Let me see, I gotta hook up to this projector thing, forgot to do that. Where's the,
Let's see.
Cool, thank you. Oh, it has a HDMI. I was gonna plug in the one you had on the laptop before.
Yeah.
They took it away.
Well, I can do without a slideshow. While I get it going, I'll just come over here. It's not a very good slideshow anyway. I did not use AI to make it, as you might be able to tell.
Do you want it?
And awesome.
I think that's great.
Cool. Well,
Thank you.
appreciate the assistance. So there's a lot of things I could talk about tonight. I was figuring out how can I make this most relevant to you in the limited time we have. And if I go off course here or whatever, we'll see what happens. I guess I've fortunately for me, America decided it's okay to just get up and ramble nonsensically as a public speaking engagement. So, you know, I have no notes here. I was kind of curious to hear from you where you're coming from tonight and what you might be curious to know about, because I'd love to be able to speak to you either now or later more of what you're interested to dive into. I brought some note cards to like pass around in case like anyone just has a question they want to write down, in case, you know, I might be able to get to it. Do you mind like start just passing these around? And just like for now, okay, just maybe show of hands. Did anyone come here with something in particular about energy policy that we're really hoping to learn about? Or just something already in mind? Okay. It's not too many people. What was it?
We have the comprehensive plan coming up. I wanna know what we can do to the refineries in that plan. It is under our jurisdiction.
Good question, very much. Okay, we'll get to that for sure. Any other things people hope I can cover? Bring issues?
Electrification of shipping.
It wasn't quite here, but yeah, we can touch on that for sure. There's some things to mention. Okay, keep it in mind.
So we've learned recently that one of our county commissioners is going to be retiring, and there will be someone appointed in her place. Can you address the jurisdiction really of the county and the issues that you're concerned with and that we're concerned with here? What does the county have to do with them?
For sure, yeah, we can definitely talk about that.
Can you repeat what she said?
Issues that Skagit County will be taking up.
Pollution from all the tankers and shipping traffic that's ever increasing, both through Skagit County, Whatcom County, into DC.
I could do a whole presentation just on that. I'll try to touch on all of it, yeah, and I'd love to come back and dive more into each of those things. Organization I work for, we're based in Bellingham, been around for over 40 years. I have the privilege of being able to work on these issues I'm passionate about and spend all my time thinking about climate change and energy, and working toward at the local level where we can really make an impact. Because I do believe, though, climate change, of course, global challenge, huge issue. I guess the only good news, unlike nuclear warfare, it's at least we know it's going to happen. And can prepare. It's really an exciting time. I've seen massive transformation in the last decade of working on this. I was actually in Paris when the climate accord was signed, and since then it's really just like a whole different world. Remarkable progress. Forgot to mention that we stopped that oil train project that Shell was trying to build. But in this era, less concerned about stopping things and more about building the infrastructure, building the world we need so that, say, 20, 25 years from now, we can continue to live, thrive, progress as human society in a world that does not pollute the climate, in which we're achieving net zero, and where through drawdown of ecosystem restoration of the oceans and forests, we're able to stabilize our climate by the end of the century, while riding out the consequences of it for the rest of the century. But it's not the end of the world. And what we're dealing with is the degrees of severity here, not whether it's going to happen, but to what extent. And I honestly believe we're going to get there. I believe we're going to get to net zero by 2050, and that ultimately everyone will be better off for it. But call me an optimist. Just want to talk about some general things for context here before we dive into Anacortes, local level. Bring it in, but just put in perspective here. The thing about energy is, if you learned something a couple of years ago, it's no longer true. It's a rapidly changing, evolving, dynamic field of everything, especially just in the last 5 years. It's huge takeoff with renewables. You can see on the graph here now. I think this was as of 2023. They exceeded coal in U.S. as a share of U.S. power generation. Of course, natural gas rose with the fracking boom, starting through the 2010s. But convention says that our emissions peaked in 2005 in the US. That's disputable. They're growing worldwide, but most likely are going to peak worldwide in the 2030s and then decline. As a share of, what do we mean by renewables that's represented in that graph? Well, pretty stable amount of hydropower, which is about 3/4 of the power we use in Washington state, comes from the Cascades. It's in decline because hydropower generates energy from, energy is stored in frozen water in the mountains, the Cascades, then it melts and comes down, spins the turbines. There's less snowpack in the mountains continuing, and that trajectory is declining over the next several decades. Is when it rains in the winter instead of snows. We don't get snowpack. But you can see this takeoff in wind energy, of course, now representing a significant share in solar. These are intermittent resources, which are, bring a whole host of issues in terms of, for utilities to deal with. One of the big challenges, I think the thing that's holding them back is not that, the cost of the generation is less than anything else. Coal is the most expensive way to generate power. Gas is way more expensive. Wind and solar are the cheapest, hands down. The thing that makes them cost more is the transmission, having to build new transmission lines that connect to new sources that are in places that in the past no one thought we were going to build a power plant. And that's a big challenge right now is that utilities are facing, and one of the big things that we need to overcome. But these problems are solvable. Electric vehicles have taken off. This is fueling a massive growth in electric demand, which raises more challenges when we're trying to phase down our fossil fuel power. But it's also good for air quality, and it's electric vehicles are a way that we exist in 25 years without having to burn fossil fuels, right? So think of it less about like the immediate emissions decreases resulting from them, and more about how we move toward the infrastructure being in place where folks can get around and get the things we need every day. And it was 1.4 million vehicles sold in the US in 2023. I'm pretty sure it was a lot more than that in 2024. This is a whole new thing. And the US is like behind the rest of the world by far when it comes to EVs. Most of the rest of the world is outpacing us by multitudes in terms of EVs entering the market, ICEs on their way out. Most electric vehicles are Chinese, and they're very cheap. Chinese vehicles can be bought all over Asia for like $10,000 new, and they're like solid cars actually, but we don't get those here. Here, this era where it's like the luxury vehicle market is only going to last so long before that's just what vehicles are going to be. We still got to use all the cars we have for a while. Of course, that just covers for where new cars are needed. Oil's been booming in the U.S. like crazy. If folks remember, y'all probably remember a lot of talk about peak oil in the 2000s and this decline in resource, extractable resources. All changed with the revolution in hydraulic fracturing, directional drilling. Starting in the late 2000s, around 2009, you started seeing this huge boom. Coincided with the Obama administration, of course. Huge expansion, largest expansion of all time that's continued to this day. Today, U.S. produces more oil than ever anyone has in the history of the world. And we're the largest producer of oil in the world, the largest exporter. We're a net exporter. We produce more than we consume in the U.S. and we export it. So definitely an energy crisis, as the Trump administration determined. We're in an energy emergency where we really have to drill, baby, drill, or we're in trouble. But no, the truth is that the only thing holding back more drilling is the price of oil being too low. So drillers, extractors, they want a higher price. So much of the new policies we're seeing are oriented around how do we get the price up so that to make it more profitable, so that there can be more drilling. And thankfully by exporting oil and building up capacity to export oil, you make the price go up because now domestic consumers are in competition with someone who will buy it from more overseas. That's the whole thing. So, one way or the other, prices are going to go up. It's too bad. Think about gasoline prices, because I know there's a lot of folks feeling the pain at the pump, talking about it. But in perspective, right? So in 2008, the average price of a gallon of gas was over $4 in 2008. Right now, it's under $4. I'm pretty sure. Where it really hit a peak in 2022, up here around $4.50 or something. I think it maybe hit in some places a little over $5 in Washington, but adjusted for inflation, pretty much the same price people paid in the 1950s or any other time. It's like gas has not been more expensive. What has changed is cars have gotten a lot bigger. They have bigger tanks. Their sedans are basically gone. It's all SUVs and trucks, and so people are 20-gallon tanks that they're filling up, and they're paying a lot more. But overall, fuel in the U.S. is a fraction of what people pay in most countries. Most countries, people are paying 4 or 5 times this, or at least double. You just drive across the border, the border to Canada, you see it. It's in liters, but it's more than double, right? And that's just, we're used to having some of the cheapest fuel in the world because the kind of the whole basis of the U.S. dollar is pegged to oil, and don't have time to go into all that. This other huge development we've been seeing is liquefied natural gas exports, which started in 2016 from the U.S. and are continuing to grow rapidly and are projected to, I think, double where they were last year or 3 years from now. So this graph should keep going up. That's all going out through the Gulf, none of it through the West Coast, but there are terminals being built. One down in Mexico, and a number, like 10 of them being built in Canada. The first one just started operating last month. This has long been planned and long delayed, but Canada's whole national energy strategy is to export their gas to someone besides the US, because right now they have a huge surplus, way more than they need. They send it all south. If they can send it overseas to hubs that buy it in, say, Japan, South Korea, they're gonna pay 4 or 5 times more than what the US does. There's a greater cost to freezing it into liquid and transporting across the ocean, but they can still make a lot more. Something substantially more than by selling it to us. So, come back to your question, Cycler.
Is that map the existing infrastructure or the proposed infrastructure?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll get to that. I was going to get to that there. This is existing pipelines. So just meant to illustrate here. So all of the gas for just echo here. I feel like it's better just without a mic. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So. So 100% of the gas we use in Northwest Washington comes from Canada. So this is just trying to illustrate here. So there is a lot of oil and gas, produced in California, but it's mostly California keeps it. They don't send it up north. California is a petrostate. California does refine more oil than Texas. They're the top 3 along with Texas and Alaska. It's not commonly known. They frack all over the place. They drill offshore. California's a petroleum state. As well as a clean energy state. Texas, also a clean energy state. There's a lot of misconceptions about all this. But they don't send it up here. The other source is the Rockies of Colorado. Sends gas up this way. There's another pipeline that can make its way, through eastern Washington to Oregon from Canada that, brings it from the Alberta area. But all of our gas up here comes from a place called the Montney Shale in British Columbia, about 1,000 miles north of here, and it comes down this pipeline. It's transferred at the border at Sumas in Whatcom County, and then it makes its way to all these, homes and buildings and coal, gas thermal fire generation plants owned by Puget Sound Energy, and all of its uses. So when something goes wrong with that supply chain, a lot can go wrong, like in an extreme winter event, because not only do you need more, gas for direct heat, you need more gas for power. If it gets shut off, you got blackouts, you got bad situation. We're pretty vulnerable to that. And storing gas is kind of dangerous and costly and difficult. These fracking wells have to be drilled constantly. They hit their halfway point about less than half a year in. It was about 2 months, they've managed to get up to about 6 months. We gotta constantly drill more, or rather extend the range for miles underground with their directional drilling they're getting really good at. But to keep everything running depends on this extraction continuing to happen in Canada. And what this graph shows, to illustrate, right, so BC production in billion cubic feet per day, here in green, produced by British Columbia. It's about 1/3 of the gas produced in Canada. Our Washington consumption is about 1/10 of what BC produces. So, but we're the one place they export to, basically. The rest of it goes to the rest of Canada. But now, by 2028, their liquefied natural gas export capacity will be almost as much as their production now. Like existing as of like 2 months ago, it's this tiny sliver, like nothing, in all of Canada. Now all of a sudden, we're gonna get this massive network of LNG terminals, so these ships will be coming through the Salish Sea, through Washington waters, definitely contributing to, you know, problems with, you know, sensitive habitat for killer whales and already congested, crowded waterways with, you know, Trans Mountain Pipeline oil exports out of Burnaby, all of that. But just from a consumer perspective, it is unavoidable that the gas bill is gonna go up. So not only is the direct gas bill gonna go up, your electricity rates are gonna go up because, you know, those utilities may have long-term contracts at a lower rate, but when they have to renew those, their negotiation power is like, they don't have to sell it to us. They don't have to sell us gas. And now, before we relied on them selling gas to us at a loss for so many years out of more complex arrangements, US and Canada, and now US and Canada relations in international trade no longer so good. They could just, you know, they could also slap a surcharge just to transport it to us, like we've seen happen, like Ontario did this in the east. We're vulnerable to price shocks here. And then, you know, the good news is, okay, gas gets more expensive. Now it's easier for people to just up and electrify and switch to a heat pump. But then that adds more demand for power, which has to come from burning gas, which is also more expensive because, you know, we're still so dependent on it. Point is that your gas bill is going to get more expensive. And so this whole thing with the initiative last year, there was this narrative that like we should not have any policy to manage a transition off gas because, you know, to save money basically, like, you know, it was all backwards. It's all backwards. Like the only way we can have lower energy bills is by not being dependent on gas. That doesn't mean stopping using it now because we can't have everyone electrify all at once, but it does mean not expanding demand for this product that's in limited bottleneck supply. So not like connecting every new building to more gas. That is like an inflexible demand that would be really expensive to get off of later. It means also being more efficient in general with, you know, instead of using an electric baseboard heater that's super inefficient, having a heat pump instead, making these investments when the building is being planned and designed in the first place, costs less to actually install overall than hooking up a gas line. Point is like, it's not about being anti, you know, being like, you know, there's sort of a, there's just, I just bring this up as context and also because of where you are in Anacortes, where you have this pipeline actually spurs down here off of the main route and comes out, and there's been a pipeline expansion plan to expand your gas transmission capacity to Anacortes, and it's still not entirely clear why Cascade Natural Gas is doing that, but yeah, just context. Question.
I'm confused here with the terminology. Gasoline, natural gas. I mean, we get a huge amount of crude oil comes through the Trans Mountain Express pipeline, just expanded. We get a huge amount of crude oil going to our refineries, and you're talking about electricity. And is it the natural gas? I'm confused between natural gas and gasoline.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'm sorry I don't have more slides to cover this more detail. It's one of those things we're going to touch on it, and then I need to come. It's the whole thing. I could just talk only about this. Okay, so to clarify, so natural gas is it's methane mostly extracted.
And that's our electricity source. Natural gas is our electricity source. Is that it?
Yeah. So we burn it. So it's the gas you burn in your home if you have a gas furnace or a gas stove. That's the gas you're burning. It's coming from Canada. It's also a significant portion of our electricity supply because there's one they have in Skagit here, Fredonia, and then there's 4 in Whatcom County out of 9 owned by Puget Sound Energy total that make up about half or more of their electricity supply is those plants that burn gas to boil water, spin turbines. There is also oil from many of the same supplies. Now in Canada, so increasingly now actually North America overall, since that turn around when peak oil ended, was because we were able to access these unconventional oil sources. So the oil that comes from North Dakota on the trains to the refineries is actually synthetic oil made from condensing natural gas. They've managed how to frack, frack it all over North Dakota, the Bakken Formation, and then have it pressurized so that it can come out of the ground as oil, and it's what they call light sweet crude. And so in different parts of the country, you either focus on one or the other. You extract for oil, you extract for gas, but they're both hydrocarbons. They're related. It just kind of depends on where you're extracting it. But the oil coming to refineries, there's another pipeline I put on the map here that what you mentioned, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's another good thing to keep in mind. That is owned by Canada. So the Canadian federal government owns the pipeline in the United States, the pipeline that's in Washington that delivers the oil to the 4 refineries here. And the 4 refineries, the 2 at Marsh Point, the 2 at Cherry Point, that's like most of the entire Pacific Northwest fuel supply for trucks and cars and airplanes. All of the airports, Vancouver, Portland, SeaTac. It's called SEA now, not SeaTac. They all get their fuel from those refineries, and so what they're refining is a mix of the synthetic oil from natural gas and diluted tar sands bitumen, which is this asphalt-like substance that they've just erased for us and turned it into a tar pit and scrape it off and dilute it and put it down the pipeline. Offshore, and some conventional regular crude oil like you're used to thinking of.
Talking about pipelines, I just came back through Cedar Woolley and across the valley. It looks like they're putting in a 16 to 18 inch brand new pipeline. Do you know what that one is?
Yeah, that's a, you're talking about like near, where was it again?
Well, I came through Cedar Woolley on,
yeah.
the pipeline's there, but also if you come across, what is it, I can't think of the road, the valley.
Yeah.
You can see the pipeline.
It's like west of Burlington.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a Cascade Natural Gas project. They've had a few expansions lately. There's, I think it's like a mile or two. They're moving underground. There's some expanded distribution, but they've also been peeling together this expansion of what's called the Anacortes lateral transmission line that comes off of the main line that's here, the Northwest Pipeline, owned by a different company, but Cascade Natural Gas, they've been expanding that in pieces. I think the one you saw is probably, that could have been, was it above ground or did you just see signs?
Well, they were welding it, so I think they were gonna put it underground.
They were probably they were gonna feed it underground. That runs under farmland. It crosses, pipeline runs, oil and the gas pipeline, they run under all the rivers and water bodies and.
But it's not connected up into Canada, it's not a new supply line, is what you're doing.
Well, that one is just like from, it's just a connection with, in the existing system. But the main line from Canada hasn't been expanded in a long time.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to get stuck on that for too long. Maybe we come back to it, but it was kind of just for context in this overview. Changes that are happening now and in the near future. So energy storage, right? So these other ways that we've been able to store energy before is like in fossil fuels. You can stockpile the coal, you can stock up on your diesel in a tank or whatever. You can store it. You store your hydropower in the water in the mountains. You can kind of store gas to some extent. They store gas in underground caverns and by freezing it down to negative 250 degrees. But that's kind of expensive to do. In order to make renewable energy work, you need storage because solar doesn't run at night, although it's very reliable during the day, and wind is intermittent. Some of the time, not always sure when it's going to be. It can be a whole lot at once and then nothing another time. The way you get there is with storage, and there's been tremendous advancements in energy storage technology. Not just batteries, there's other ones too, but batteries are what's really been booming for the last 5 years. And they've come way down in cost, and they've been, built out like crazy, right? So you're going back 2017, there was no battery storage anywhere, and then you started to get 2020, they built more than had ever existed in the entire world before then. Doubled that the next year, doubled it again in 22, doubled it again in 23, and then it's still going. I think in 2022, Texas alone built more battery capacity storage for power than existed worldwide in 2019. And then they've, I think, done more than double that since. So it's this huge boom right now, and you may have heard about it coming here with, and there's projected to be more, but let's see, what the US is blue here, so in the worldwide. But as you can see, China dominates in all forms of renewable energy. China dominates by far. They're also the largest greenhouse gas emitter, but they're definitely the leader in batteries and solar and whatnot. How many folks have here heard or been concerned about the battery energy storage projects proposed in Skagit County lately? Well, yeah, I figured that. I'd love to dive a little bit more into that. Would folks like me to come back to talk about batteries more? But first, just like an overview of just like all these things. It's changing. Like our energy system, like both systems are being upended for various reasons. They just can't continue. The economics are changing. There's a lot of challenges to make it all work, but we're also in this time of a lot of really exciting breakthroughs. Talk about the impact of LNG export. That's going to just change the economics of gas, natural gas. Hydrogen. So I kind of cut this out of the presentation because it was there was this plan for this big Pacific Northwest hydrogen hub that was going to have billions of dollars coming in. That's like getting kind of pulled back. And there was going to be a big project up at Cherry Point, but now with the big beautiful bill and they're no longer, like they'd have to, tax credits and subsidies gone. It's probably not happening for a while, and it's probably not the best thing yet to be essentially generating hydrogen power. Hydrogen is another way to store energy. You put in water and power into an electrolyzer, out comes hydrogen. You put the hydrogen into a fuel cell, out comes water and power. So, like, those are the only inputs and outputs, water and power. So just like any other kind of industrial facility, it consumes water and power, but a lot less than other kinds of industrial facilities you might, like a smelter or a power plant or an oil refinery are consuming a lot more water and power than, say, an electrolyzer might, depending on its scale. But then that hydrogen can be used to power like big ships and trains and heavy haul long haul trucks and things like that, in ways that have advantages over batteries, which are just heavy. So the hydrogen economy, there's still a lot of hype about that. It's something that's going to play an important part of the energy mix of the future for sure, because the technology is so mature now. But the problem is you need a lot of power, and we don't really have enough of it as it stands, and the power is too expensive to make it really the business case quite work without subsidy at this point. Right now we make hydrogen out of natural gas through steam reformation. Most hydrogen now is produced, it goes to be consumed in oil refineries and their processes. So the idea of building it out here next to the refineries was, well, until, even if like the ships and the trains don't come along right away to fuel up, the plan was trucks, but there's at least the refineries there that'll buy your hydrogen, and they can count it as, carbon emission reduction instead of using natural gas. But that's all on pause, probably for the next 3 or 4 years. We'll see what happens. Geothermal power. Now that the technology of oil and gas extraction, where they've advanced so much to drill deeper and horizontally or in any direction, you can apply that in order to access geothermal energy from the lithosphere, from magma of the earth. And especially if you're near like a volcano, like Mount Baker, you can get even more of it in order to tap into energy and then generate power. So there's a lot of potential there, and for better or worse, this is one thing that the Trump administration is apparently supportive of, as they say, but probably not as they actually will do. It's just like it's hard to know what's really going to happen. But they're saying they're supportive of geothermal and nuclear, and there's a huge resurgence in America and worldwide now of nuclear power generation that really kind of stalled out since the 80s. We have one plant in Washington, generates about 10% of the statewide power mix, but it's it opened in like 1984, and it's there's interest in expanding through these small modular reactors. So basically taking like a nuclear submarine reactor, but on land, and then you have multiple of them to scale up to the amount of power you want. So they're manufactured somewhere in the world, and they're kind of like a lot. They're newer designs. They're very different. There's a whole bunch of different, the next generation nuclear reactors, very different from the plans of the past. don't have time to get into that, but just know that's a thing. Probably the big holdup though, aside from like the environmental concerns and safety and all of those concerns that you may have, is that it's just so expensive. It's like it's the most expensive kind of power that we can get. And so, but these big companies like Microsoft and Amazon now are willing to pay a lot for it to get that going because they just need power for their data centers. And the thing is like the idea is once you get over the hump, it would get cheaper. But we'll see. Who knows? The jury, we don't know what's going to, it's definitely unknown. Nuclear fusion, on the other hand, huge breakthroughs happening. I don't know, has anyone heard about nuclear fusion lately in the news?
No, actually.
So, for probably your entire lives, if you've ever heard of it, you've heard people say it's like, it's the energy of the future and it always will be. It's always, and yet we're in the future. We have actually like Android robots and self-driving cars and flying. We have future stuff now. And one of the things that's actually coming on is actual nuclear fusion. And much of the world's leading startups in nuclear fusion are, like, some of them are in Washington. I toured a plant in Everett recently, Helion Energy, one of the leading startups. They're running on like $1 billion of private equity. They have like 525 employees there in this big factory-like setting where they've built prototypes, demonstrated a technology and engineering design. The physics are proven. They're contracted with Chelan Puty to build a power plant. They're underway in the permitting process to have it online and generating power in 2028.
Holy hot diggity.
First, they need to prove that it actually will work, which they plan to do in a couple months, to generate an energy positive fusion reaction, which they've, will probably, you might hear about. There's other companies competing with different designs for different kinds of applications. Theirs is for generating power. And yeah, this plant would produce about 50 megawatts, which is enough to power a small town, and that's net generation, and it's really just to prove the concept. It'll be very expensive, but the idea is once you gotta start somewhere, and it's happened. Washington could have the very first commercial generating nuclear fusion plant, and fusion, unlike fission, is actually quite safe. There's really just functionally, it's very hard to keep the reaction going, even if you're trying really hard. It's really like there's really there are not plausible conditions where like a meltdown could happen, where the thing got out of control and just kept generating energy. If it blew up, it would just stop. If it got bombed or something. But on its own, it's like the inputs. There's no uranium. There's no nuclear waste output. You're fusing heavy hydrogen. You're replicating the reaction in the sun, where you fuse heavy hydrogen atoms together to make helium, and so it'll generate helium and power.
Where would they get this deuterium?
So right now they distill deuterium out of water, because about 1 out of every 150 or so water molecules is a heavy water molecule with the deuterium, which is like it's called heavy water, right? So they showed me a bottle of this in the factory, and it's actually quite cheap to produce. And then you electrolyze it like the way you make hydrogen. You electrolyze out the heavy hydrogen. But they also need tritium, which is like a 3-proton hydrogen molecule. They diffuse the deuterium and the tritium together. Ideally, the tritium they have to extract from. It's a little harder to get, but there's other designs in the works to use boron potentially. But yeah, they have hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, but basically we just get it from water. You gotta electrolyze water to get it out. And then the thing is though, once you're generating power, you can use that energy to make more fuel out of water. So it's very sci-fi, but like it is the thing that's long been dreamed of, where if we can make nuclear fusion work, and it could mean essentially just limitless energy, because it produces its own fuel. It could be world changing for sure, but for it to be actually economically viable, scalable, that's not happening in the next 5 years. So we need to keep moving, and it could, who knows? It could be 50 years. It's actually, we don't really know until it's done. What we do know works right now are distributed energy resources, like rooftop solar, with say on-site battery storage, where you would really never have a blackout happen again, because you're set in that. If you have that, if you're a homeowner, you have that, and especially with any kind of new development, it just makes a lot of financial sense to invest in that. Challenges like, I mean, moving toward, you know, the management and the networking together of all these sources, but in small sources, you know, that can work really well without having to like build a whole standalone power plant, like a big field of solar panels or something. For wind generation, you do have to do that. They built it all, a whole lot of it in eastern Washington, and it sounds like it's making its way over here. There's an interest in building a relative, moderately sized wind energy facility in the Skagit foothills, and you know that could come here. There's a company that's exploring that right now.
There's talk about doing a tidal turbine in Rosario Straits. You familiar with that?
Tidal, yeah, I mean, I've heard of it, and tidal doesn't make a lot of sense to me, unless it seems like it's only useful if it's on an island, you know, where
This would be near Orcas, so.
Yeah, and they were exploring that. I know they ran into a lot of concerns, tribal concerns around impacts to fisheries. I think in Washington and the Salish Sea area, it's not worth it to pursue tidal because of just like the amount of power you get for it is not really worth the interfering or having to deal with that or risk any of that, interfere with fishing, or habitat. It's like, you know, there's some other, I think, promising uses of, you know, micro hydro sources, so like generating hydro without having to build a dam. And I think that's the kind of technology that will develop in this way of more where we just have little amounts of energy generation built into pretty much everything, you know? If you just have it like kind of built into the boat, you know, you got your solar and your tidal energy or your wave energy kind of just built in enough to power your lights, you know? It's like ways to just take off that load and make us more just, you know, free of energy, where, you know, the only cost is the equipment, the appliance. Separate that off from the cost of energy. It's just like anything else you need to buy. That one, though, yeah, I'm like, you know, it's like, I don't know. But there's no panacea, right? There's no one thing that's gonna fix everything, even fusion. Energy challenges are complex, and let's just remember that, you know, any form of energy development is gonna have negative adverse environmental consequences. The overall, you know, environmental health and social impacts really depend on where you do it and how well you plan it and what conditions you put in place. What are the rules, the safeguards, the requirements, the oversight, the limits, like all that. It needs to be regulated because it is all dangerous. All of it is dangerous, or could be, right? Except for solar. I mean, not really. It just like sits there and generates power. But the federal government is like upending these trends that we've been on. We've been on this trajectory, and then, you know, the Trump administration comes crashing in, and day one they have this Unleash an American Energy executive order that says we have this national energy emergency, and we just, like, you know, contrary to, you know, under Obama and Biden, it was like the most oil ever produced in the U.S. But, you know, apparently they were too hard on the oil industry, so we have to. Did I lose my slide here? You know, it's just a bunch of it's energy policy based on a fictional reality. But one thing they did have.
Is your cable, did it get jiggled?
I don't know if I really need it anyway, but actually I probably do. One thing the Biden administration did have was a pause on liquefied natural gas exports, which helped stop prices from rising, because they've been rising in the Gulf since they started LNG export. There's a study I saw of like Harvard, MIT, that estimated it was like having a carbon tax in place of $30 a ton, the equivalent price impact that it had. And it's probably will have more in the future when contracts get renewed and such. But, you know, they put this pause on LNG export. You know, the Trump administration lifted that. The new energy secretary is all about it. He comes from the fracking industry. You know, they repealed investment and production tax credits for clean energy. So you have to get started in construction by end of next year to get them, or then we're done after that. So there's a lot of projects that have been in the works that may still be able to access that 30% credit, which is kind of a make or break. But projects that weren't further along, they're going to get called off. There's like just a lot of overall, it's just going to energy prices are going to have to go up because the business plan is getting upended by this change in policy. Where now, there's a lot of just actively anti-clean energy policies, trying to prevent it from any more of it from getting built, and then active subsidies, like the big beautiful bill full of stuff, like direct subsidies and investments in the oil industry. So they get to raise prices but still charge what they get to export, charge whatever they want. Maybe, who knows? Maybe the prices will stay down for a while, but it's only a matter of time. A lot of things getting called off. A lot of things that just make no sense. So the Bonneville Power Authority operates the Columbia River dams and doesn't use any tax money at all. In fact, it actually sends a check to the government every year. They generate revenue because they make all their money off of selling power. And it's sort of the backbone of the Northwest Power Grid. So, DOGE comes in and just lays off, just knocks out 20% of their workforce where they were already understaffed and struggling to get the trained people they needed. So just eliminated everyone they just spent the last 2 years training. And then, a lot of senior middle management took the buyout deal. They got this random email that says, you can walk away and get paid for 6 months. And so, now they're like, it just puts things more on hold in terms of building out new energy projects, wind and transmission, or even just keeping the dams going. It's just stuff that there's no case to be made. It's just carelessness. It's just let's lay everyone off and not care about the consequences. That's the kind of thing they've been doing. And then, and it's going to make rates go up. And then and then they've also been there was a coal plant that was supposed to retire last month and shut down, and all the workers had their retirement planned because they've been planned for many years for the plant to close, and then they just forced it to keep running. So they've had to scramble to get their coal orders, get their supplies, and keep their workforce somehow. And even though they were all planning to leave, and just to keep this coal plant running, where there was literally no business interest in America that asked for them to keep the plant running. No one said we need this coal power because no utility needed it. They just we're gonna burn coal just to burn coal. That's what they do. So thankfully though in Washington we have been making a lot of progress still. Clean energy landmark laws like the Clean Energy Transition Act and the Climate Commitment Act and others that we built on are kind of just in their early stages of implementation here, but what we have is a cap on large stationary sources of carbon emissions, overall very successful carbon market where those pollution allowances have been bought at auction. This act, if you recall being on the ballot last year, a strong majority of people in Skagit County, it was 56% voted to keep it in place, and statewide it was 62%. I think voted to preserve this law. So any attempt to repeal it is done. Now there's a mandate to keep that in place, and will require emissions to scale down over time. Clean Energy Transition Act requires in the power sector for utilities to shut down their fossil fuel plants, their gas plants by 2045. Coal has to be completely gone by the end of 2025. They have to be net zero, producing enough renewable energy to power everything by 2030. But they keep the gas plants online to make sure that the grid doesn't go out because you need them you need them because we are until we can build out everything else. The gas is there for backup is the idea until 2045 when all those plants would have closed anyway because they'd be so old. But that is under attack. There's a huge push to repeal that. There's a growing movement in utilities, I think, that are struggling with the growing demand for power that's greater than previously estimated just a couple of years ago because of the AI boom in part, and underestimating in other areas. But yeah, there's this huge growing demand for power and vehicle electrification too, and all that. We're gonna have to, double or triple the amount of power generation, right, to get where we need to go. And it's just something to watch out for. These issues are complicated, but that's what's going on. And God, That's, how much time do I have left? We go till 9? I'll pause for questions. Yeah. I want to talk about the local level.
Yeah.
Before we
If we have questions, can I bring the microphone so everybody can hear it?
Hi, so this is a crazy idea. In Washington State, the federal and local governments have probably the biggest developable land for solar in our roads. Has anybody been taking a look at capping roads with solar?
What do you mean by capping roads?
Coming up from the side of the road and cantilevering the panels over the top of the road. And getting double use out of the roads, continuing to let the roads be roads, but using the sky above them
use the
as
space.
places for solar, because it doesn't compete with farmland, it doesn't compete with other development. It already is just sitting there doing nothing but heating up. That also might have some potential to reduce the heat island effect from all the pavement.
I don't know about plans to do that, but I am intrigued by that idea. I mean, that could make sense, just given, you know, an existing right of way of space, because just access to land. You know, overall, I'm not sure about, you know, the cost of like installing the, you know, a safe awning, you know, that's safe, that, you know, I think I would, you know, does it present, like, you'd have to study like the risks of what happens if a truck crashes into it, and like anything, you know, to get through permitting. But yeah, that's the kind of thing. I mean, I think putting solar in places that get sun, that aren't in the way, and that, you know, have the added effect of shading, like shading streams to help keep the rivers cold for salmon is another, you know, in some places where, you know, it's a good place to put some panels.
Well, there's very robust engineering that's been done over the decades on road infrastructure like signs, light standards, and other devices that are already installed next to or over roadways. So we don't need to re-engineer that. We just need to put different stuff on it. And most roads have the power infrastructure right there to be able to tie in as micro-generation.
Yeah, I think that's something that'd be interesting for the project for anybody to explore with, if not at WSDOT, maybe to pilot at a local level, like on a county road in an appropriate place. I mean, as far as like, you know, the thing with solar, right, is that, so the solar modules are ridiculously cheap, right? Like $100 or something, you know, for a panel. And in China, they're like $25 for like a 500 watt panel, you know? And the US has the most expensive solar in the world because we're protecting our domestic manufacturing with tariffs that the Biden administration put in place. And that's what, you know, leaves us jobs here. Like in Burlington, we got a big factory. It's producing like 1,800 solar panel modules per day. So if you do the math, I mean, they're producing enough solar power capacity to, did the math at one point, and it was, it's a lot. And that's just one of hundreds of factories that are producing panels around the world, right? The cost of them is the installation. It's the cost of wiring it to the grid. And it's not just like, especially if you want it to be like grid connected and not off grid, you know, the utilities have to plan for it. They gotta adjust, everything's more complicated. And it's the labor of installation of, you know, just paying the people to put them on your roof. Like, definitely costs more than the panels themselves. So, you know, like with any solar project, it's like, well, where the location can bear a lot in like the overall project cost, while the equipment is actually really cheap. It's about to get a lot more expensive because of supply chains being upended, like other things. But, you know, right now, yeah, so it just really depends, you know, you gotta factor a lot of things. Any questions? But solar in general, I think, will certainly, in a matter of time, be accounting for all residential level power demand. Even if it'll just be like a fraction of our overall power supply, it's going to be really hard to get it up to like where it can power like the heavy industrial power uses. But as far as like, yeah, absolutely, like enough to power every home residence and, you know, average daily use of an electric car, we could totally achieve that through just distributed rooftop solar. Totally feasible. Yeah.
I have a non-energy related question. We just recently moved here from Seattle, and the thing that I notice, both in our involvement in the Democratic Party in Seattle and here, is the demographics. And this is, you look around this room, and I'm just wondering, do you, when you're talking to people, are you usually talking to a group of old folks like we are? Or do you get traction with younger people? Because that's what we've got to figure out.
Yeah.
Because the younger people are the future, and we better get a hold of that in a hurry.
Well, it's an astute observation. I mean, in short, yes. And but I came out of student activism and organizing when I was at Western Washington University. That's kind of what led me into the organization I work for now, and the climate movement and all this work. And now I manage a public utility or oversee it. But I've noticed a pattern of like in the days when we were doing a lot more like on the ground community organizing and manage volunteers, and it's people who are of retirement age or under 25. People that essentially don't have kids at home that they have to take care of are the ones who have time and capacity to come out to events in the evening, community meetings, get involved in organizing and volunteering. So it tends to be folks. It's what it is. I mean, people are busy, but no, that's a good point. I mean, I think there's a lot of interest in younger people for sure, though, in all of these issues, and certainly.
Any suggestions on how we might get them interested in participating with all of us?
Well, it's organizations like yours, spaces like these, all that work that goes into just putting on a simple event like this and making the space for people to come back to. All that is that's what makes democracy work. Your active citizenry. It's really what we all depend on. It's what, for all the public processes that governments set up or laws in place, they only work if people are paying attention to them and actually participate, or whoever's paid to have the time to do it is going to be shaping it, right? And so that's where I focused largely in our theory of change and how we work is at the local level, because local politics is so often overlooked. It seems to be less thought about. There isn't as much steady news coverage. You have to have a reason to care in the first place to start paying attention and get hooked in. People might be good about voting every year, but not remember who they voted for the next year. And I don't blame you, right? And it can be pretty dry and not super, accessible for a lot of people. But local governments altogether, like counties and cities, hold the keys to everything, right? All of the things that are most vital to daily life and necessary to addressing climate change, both the adaptation side in managing, our preparation for these weather patterns, changes to water and disaster risk management, and the solutions in our transportation and buildings and water and power and all the things we implement. They're almost entirely handled primarily at the local level. Planning and zoning, siting, what can be built, what, when, and where, decided by local governments. Counties have enormous power, and in a small community, you have more power to influence what they do, and you want to combine the combined budgets of the it's like 4,000 counties in America, in the United States. That's more money getting spent than the federal government, I think, and it's and most big federal spending has to be spent through counties, right? They distribute it in block grants in various forms to counties that then decide where it goes to get to various services. Counties are super important, and Skagit County and Anacortes are particularly important because of your geographic location, for various reasons when it comes to our broader regional climate and energy issues. I mean, how many folks have been to like a planning commission meeting before, or city council, county council, right? And I know this is, you're the crowd that cares and pays attention, and you know who you're voting for, and you're helping get others out. Your educational events. I'm curious, like, what motivated, like, you want to share, like, what motivated them to start, to go to a meeting like that?
The fully contained community proposal, it was before the county commissioners.
Okay, yeah, land use,
Yeah.
Fully contained.
Yeah.
yeah,
Fully contained.
fully contained, okay. I don't know.
I was gonna say it was farmland issues when I was, I think 14, is when I started getting involved.
Farmland issues.
Yeah, farmland zoning, farmland regulation by the county
Same issue.
here in Skagit. Yeah.
Anyone else want to? Zoning. Yeah, so, okay. Were you all hearing me well enough? Are we all already hearing me well before? Is everybody in the back? Okay, so so I've observed in many, many meetings I've been to, often sitting through things where a lot of people are there to talk about something that's not what I'm there for. Or maybe I'm interested, but it's not, my role, or I just noticed in general, various jurisdictions, Anacortes, Bellingham, Skagit County, Whatcom County, like, land use is the thing people like get most excited about, like, counterintuitively. Like, it sounds like the most boring thing that I think someone, until they're vested and they have a reason to care about it. And I've never heard like more, like the most like passionate, like controversial arguments in public are over things like accessory dwelling units being allowed, or like a zone, like an up zone in a particular place, or like something getting, like people get really, and it's always fascinating to me, right? It's like, yeah, the level, like people, people will turn out on the flip of a dime sometimes. And we saw this like in a weird way play out with this battery energy storage system thing, where this project had been in the works for years, got to its final stage with the state board that was permitting it, not the local, but suddenly there was this blow up and everyone's talking about it, there's petitions, and the county government moves quick to do a moratorium, and like sometimes it's just like something like just happens, and then governments do respond, when a lot of people flood a meeting. But anyway, it's just something I've observed. And I get why it matters, is because it's, it's the place that you live, that that you've invested in, and you're affected by the things that happen outside your property line, right? And the decisions, that's what it all is about local democracy, right? It's making those decisions together. Granted, growth management, is anyone plugged into the comprehensive plan process for the city or the county? I know Councilmember Carolyn Moulton was here and did a presentation like 6 months ago. And I think you had another one like last year at the onset of the process too, right? How are folks feeling about that so far? General vibe check.
Confused.
Confused? Okay.
I like a lot of it.
Yeah, like what they're proposing somewhere. Yeah, I've watched several jurisdictions through this, and been really impressed with Anacortes. Like Anacortes is, and watching their city council do their work, and like you have a better local government than most towns and places, I think. Diligence, attention to detail, a lot of effort to engage folks. Granted, Anacortes did. Wait, hold on. Does anyone want me to explain what a comprehensive plan is?
No.
Okay, because you're all Growth Management Act, goals. But what's new this year, right? And I think you've already heard about this too, is the climate element. So, like, the state required this new element be added to growth management to all counties as big as Skagit or larger. I think our legislative delegates were probably to thank for the way that it was like all counties, the population of Skagit's population or more were required. So the top 11 in the were required to do a climate element. and some cities. And I think, and of course was one of them. Well, I'm not sure if they're required or if they opted in, but they did receive a substantial grant funding from the state through the Climate Commitment Act to do this work of like hiring consultants, engaging folks, doing open houses and surveys and events. And they had the stakeholder group, this climate policy team, they had special meetings, a lot of cool stuff to come up with their climate element for the first time. And in following what was laid out in state law, with some pretty cool ideals to try to uphold in the goals, right? So it's not just, when we're trying to make policy, it's not just about reducing emissions or eliminating emissions over time. It's making sure that the policy solutions are also just, would be good even if we didn't have the emissions problem. They would be good socially and economically for the community, and people would like it, even if climate change wasn't a concern, right? That's how you make good policy, I think. That's what the litmus test I like to use when I think about climate policy, because like no one thing on its own is gonna solve the whole problem. So like, let's not, like, and a lot of people have concerns that we're gonna, they're concerned that we're gonna do something that's harmful in order to try to solve this big thing. But what if all the things that we did would just be good anyway? Like what if you would just, what if they'd be good either way? And those are the things we should do. And a lot of people, would agree or maybe disagree on what those things are, but that's what we gotta figure out, is what are the impacts? And those are the goals here in the planning. Granted, a comp plan is just made up words on pages, policies, it's only as good as how it gets implemented. But having those as our starting place to build on is really important and meaningful that Anacortes now has, or is about to have, these pretty forward-thinking goals to address the impacts. They had a vulnerability assessment. You're particularly vulnerable to sea level rise around here. On the way coming down, I drove past the tsunami zone warning, right? And even worse in the Skagit Valley, for sure. Skagit Valley's like extremely vulnerable to flooding. But Fidalgo too. You're on the edge of it all in a lot of ways, and you're on an island, so you're also more vulnerable if you get cut off. You want to build resiliency and autonomy to be able to weather the storm in any situation, and you're capable of doing that. You have the resources here. But these are all the kinds of things that being dealt with. This was the emissions profile from the plan. Like most places, buildings are the most energy. That natural gas and electricity, that's the bulk of your emissions. There's various sectors. It's estimates. Transportation, significant, of course. But here, so all the things that are on this graph, I put into this bar here, and then these are the direct emissions from the 2 oil refineries at March Point, just for comparison. Yeah. And that's not like the life cycle of like extracting and burning the fuel. That's just like what's coming out of the smokestack that you can measure specifically. And is now, for the last couple of years, been reported to the state. So those are the emissions of those 2 refineries. And that's everything that we do in Anacortes to, power our homes and vehicles and stores and everything, right?
What are those units?
Those are, I believe that's metric tons CO2 equivalent, I think. It's like a standard unit of measuring greenhouse gases. And so, so this wasn't included in the greenhouse gas inventory for Anacortes because March Point is outside of your city limits. So it is, interestingly though, in your planning jurisdiction, it's in what's called the urban growth area. So at some point it was decided that March Point would be contained in the Anacortes UGA. So that means it's subject to, it's part of the Anacortes comp plan, it's subject to Anacortes development rules that get put in place. It's a zone, that's outside of Anacortes, but because it's outside of city limits, it's not paying taxes to the city, and it's not, the actual permitting process is handled by the county for any development there. Shoreline permits all the county, it's all county handled. But you have this sliver of city limits that comes out along Highway 20 that cordons off March Point, interestingly. So it's effectively part of Anacortes, but also not. It's an odd kind of shared jurisdiction with Skagit County, where sort of both governments are relevant to deciding what happens there. The code at March Point, pretty vague. There's like a list of like permitted uses, oil refineries, yada yada. There's a lot of things that could potentially go there in the future that are not named, and there's almost nothing in the way of like, conditions or more detail. And this is of like major interest to me, not just because of all the pollution that comes out of the refineries, because we're dealing with that at the state level, like the Climate Commitment Act. They're regulated and they have to reduce that pollution, and the things that we're doing in the rest of the comp plan is what would help make it so we didn't need that fuel in 25 years or so. But we're going to need it for a while, for sure. Like, I mean, the economy would completely collapse if we just shut down refineries today. It would not be good. It probably wouldn't be good environmentally overall, just, chain of effects. So, but we got to recognize that they're not going to be there forever either. So what happens at March Point? It's connected to these massive amounts of service of industrial water that's served by the Anacortes Water Utility, actually, out of the Skagit River, another connection. A lot of power capacity to power these refineries. They make gray hydrogen there too, there's another plant. And it's got a lot of gas, like that gas pipeline that comes from Canada comes out through that Anacortes lateral at March Point. So it's really attractive for a lot of other industrial uses. And because there's so few places anywhere in Washington, Western Washington, that you could go and build things that certain interests want to build, that we might or might not like. And if we don't decide what happens there in advance by like writing the rules, then you're deciding after there's a development proposal, when there's already some vested interest that's trying to do a project and trying to have their way, and then it gets a lot iffier, but we have this opportunity now to get ahead of that, where these things that, we're thinking of that, might go there, like could it be, what if a nuclear fusion power plant got proposed? What if there was green electrolytic hydrogen production? What if there was liquefied natural gas storage, or a new gas-fired power plant? Or what if there was a battery energy storage system? It's an industrial zone, and it's also pretty vulnerable to climate change and things like if there's, say there was like an earthquake, a Cascadia Rising earthquake event, would not be good. It's surrounded by water. It's a peninsula of an island surrounded by water. That's basically, I think it's like, between like, it's at its highest point, I think is like, I don't know, like no more than 100 feet above sea level. So it's and lower in the edges where they have like these wastewater ponds. Folks read in the news about these these hazardous waste violations, dangerous waste. It's pretty concerning because that waste that was like sitting there in these ponds. Yeah, if there was like a big storm flooding event, that's the kind of thing that could have been worse. It seems like so far I haven't seen evidence that there was any like contamination that got out into the water. And generally the refineries are pretty good at handling their spills because they have on-site sewer treatment. Like if there's anywhere there's going to be an oil spill, I'm least worried if it happens at a refinery because they have all these systems to contain it. Like Bud used to work there, right? Like, that's the place where you're going to deal with it the quickest, and it's all like, am I wrong? Like,
no, that's right. The pushback on that is you don't want to put any oil in the water, so the shipping is, to me, the real hazard.
Yeah, so when they're loading the ships, loading or unloading is where that risk is. But thankfully we have booming requirements. They could be stronger for sure, because a lot of the regulation is pretty. It's kind of like, it's almost like the honor system. I've noticed, like, where it's like there's these loopholes where it's like do it unless it doesn't make sense to you. Like do it unless and then it's sort of up to how you determine that. I forget what the term was, but it's like pre-booming, where practical, and it's most of the time and not all the time, because then if the spill gets out, so you contain it. But another big concern is that their oily water sewer system was built in the 1950s, and that was 75 years ago, and it's just like we're approaching that. It's going to be running for we got another 20 years left of running it at least. So it's like we want them to be able to make improvements that reduce pollution risk and hazard, improve safety. A lot of that, I think, I'm interested to explore more as we learn more about the hazardous waste violations, how much of that had to do with management changing. New owners came in, the new owners of refineries only had them for a couple years, and the violations happened shortly before. It was just at the close of 2024, this new regulation came in effect for process safety management that empowered the workers, the employees, to regulate, like to enforce regulations, so that if they saw something that needed to be fixed, and they go to their boss and say, we need to fix this because it's at risk of failing, and then the boss, normally would, they gotta go to their owner who's in another state and get approval, to get it funded and planned for to fix the thing. There's accountability now where that worker who's in charge of making sure that unit doesn't fail can go to the State Department of Labor and Industry and report it and make sure that the refinery is required to fix that thing to prevent a failure. So it's like preventative maintenance to prevent an accident where anything should ever leak out of the pipes. Because the more you do in that preventative work, the less risk there is. And there's always, there's risk of things going wrong at a refinery. And the disaster, you all probably were around to see some tragic explosion in 2010. The stakes can be really high when something goes wrong. But at the local level, where we would regulate really just has to do over what can or cannot be built there in the future. And could we change the use of an existing infrastructure, right? Like say they shut down the refineries at some point, can they still use the terminal to ship oil out to somewhere else, to where they pay more for it? We could stop that. We basically stopped that in Whatcom County with an ordinance we passed in 2021. Bans new piers, docks or wharfs. It bans pretty much new fossil fuel industries of any kind. So no coal, no oil, no gas, no petrochemical plants, nothing like that can be built. With the existing refineries that operate 2 piers at Cherry Point, like the ones you have at March Point, expansions of their capacity require a conditional use permit with some stringent review process, and a change of use. Say if they wanted to start using it for transshipment, they're not allowed to do that. They're allowed to use it for refining purposes, not to pass through the hazardous fossil fuel without even refining it for our use. Those are the kind of things we can deal with. And it's not directly in the comp plan, but in Whatcom we started all that through comp plan policy, and then that led to a land use ordinance process that lasted about 5 years. If there's one thing I can take credit for in my life, it was making that happen by the end. And we passed it unanimously. Unanimous vote by the county council to adopt the Cherry Point amendments that put to rest what had been really, controversial issues around the future of Cherry Point. A lot of bitter division around whether to build a coal terminal or not. But by, in the 2012 to 2016 era, but by 2021, everyone just agreed we can put that to rest, and refineries are going to continue, but we can put limits on them and, preserve those jobs. And even the industries, by the end of it, said go ahead, vote for it, because they wanted regulatory certainty. They wanted the laws to be in place so they can move on and plan like they do for any other rules. So I think, that also the same thing got done in Tacoma, where they have the 5th refinery in Washington. Happened in Vancouver, where they have oil terminal, Vancouver, Washington. It has not happened in Anacortes or Skagit County yet. And that's where there's certainly some opportunity, and I think to do it in a way that doesn't have to be divisive or a battle even, but really just okay, we got to go through a process to set some rules in place. So let's decide right now what is reasonable to allow or not, and maybe make some space. What I'm really interested in engaging the community is make some space to have that discussion. Let's address the concerns. So, because I'm hearing these echoes of concern of people concerned about the risk of fires from batteries, right? Who aren't concerned about the risk of fires from storing tanks of diesel in schools and hospitals for the backup generator. you know, one of these like backup generators just spilled a bunch of diesel into Patton Creek in Whatcom County, and it's like city owned, and they're cleaning it up right now, and it's a big environmental hazard, and like, you know, the alternative to batteries is things like that, diesel generators, you know, that are loud and caustic, and it's like, what's the alternative, and what are the conditions that we could, you know, what needed to ensure, like, not just any battery, but batteries that are, we can be assured are safe, and are managed properly such that the risk of fire is extremely low, because it is, I mean, the incidences are incredibly low, and especially with many newer ones. And there's, you know, response plans in place, you know, there's fire blankets to throw over them, or, you know, drop if anything happens and all that. But there's still probably locations that are not appropriate to site them, and we need to be clear and decide where those are. And that's up to the community, you know, likewise for any of these things. The comp plan itself, winding down here, is out for review. There's a draft. There's a public hearing on August 27th. Oh yeah, there's this great Climate Explorer, Element Explorer, if you haven't checked it out yet, on the city website, and interactive to go and explore it. But then there's also like the full chapter out for review through the 27th. There's a public hearing with the Planning Commission, 6 p.m. Skagit County, just wrap up my updates here, but this one's really is really important. So Skagit County passed their comp plan in end of June. They have been exploring creating a climate advisory committee to help implement their new climate element that they have for the first time. They're in some extended process around their critical areas ordinance because of objections by the Swinomish tribe. But after that, they're going to be getting to a land use ordinance process to decide the rules for siting clean energy development like batteries and wind and whatnot. I think that's really important, and that would apply countywide. Right now, their code, as they just updated it, basically says that there can be no major regional utility development of any kind in any zone of Skagit County. So the definition here of this includes but is not limited to facilities and services that generate, transport, process, or store water, sewage, solid waste, electrical energy, communications, and pipelines for fuel, oil, natural gas, and petroleum products. So leaving aside that grammatically doesn't quite make sense, as I read it, this definition seems to encompass the oil and gas pipelines that run through Skagit County and the oil refineries themselves, because nowhere in Skagit Code does it say that oil refineries are allowed. It only says that you can have major utility development, or rather they have major, minor, major regional, and major regional is like designed to serve a region. So that could be arbitrated, but like decided by the administrative official. But if it's bigger than to meet Skagit County's needs, then it would be major regional. And certainly the refineries are, the hydroelectric dams are. You know, there's a lot of that there. But as I interpret it now, because this has been prohibited in the code, that's effectively a moratorium on any kind of big utility project and any kind of big fossil fuel pipeline or shipping or refining project too. So we actually have like essentially effectively a moratorium in place that gives, you know, until the code gets updated and changed again, which it could very well in a matter of months. So there's this opportunity now where we can rest easy. There isn't going to be some new scary proposal coming along. When we take our time to decide on the rules, whether it's for wind, batteries, transmission lines, where should those not go? That's coming up, probably starting in, you know, sometime this fall and then going into next year. But right now, you know, comp plan's going to wrap up. The city council is going to take it up in the fall, pass it by like November, December. But I'm more interested, well, not only in the county land use code, but Anacortes following suit with a similar process because their section of code is specific to March Point. So if you start with the county, you know, then the city may follow suit. Seems like, you know, just things have lined up where it's like the right time to do this and make these decisions that will shape, you know, years to come. What's going to get built here? Will it serve local interests and needs? Will it endanger ecosystems and public health and safety? Let's figure it out. That's what I want. I want to work with y'all to figure it out. and with taking your leaders, your elected officials. I know there's a lot of interest certainly from commissioners from Ryan Walters, your expected mayor, and I don't know if you mind me saying that, but there's awareness of the opportunities and the needs here, I think, and I'm excited to see, to go through that process, but to not just through the formal process of like, the official hearing, but all the stuff that has to happen outside of that, in meetings like this where people just get together and like process questions and concerns, like, why shouldn't we do this? Let's talk about it. I think that's what I want to do. And you can follow us. I put a sign-up sheet in the back. You want to get on our email list or something, cards you can take, you want to email me. For the city plan, I put in some links here if we're putting comments in, but yeah, I'd love to follow up with all of you. And, I guess we got a couple minutes left. Did you want, is there anything you want space for like closing announcements? Should I wrap?
I just wanted to see, are there any other questions before we wrap it up? Is anybody?
I have a quick question.
Of course.
Since we're talking about zoning and updates, is there some sort of central clearinghouse where we can find examples of codes that have been used to allow for or manage development of these kinds of regional utility scale things? Is there a place we can go to research where that has worked or what has been done?
Yeah, there is. There's some strong efforts in this actually. With there's a new there's this new state body that was created by a bill that passed I think last year. That's putting out these reports with recommendations, and it's like the Clean Energy Siting Council. And I think one of the recommendations I saw for this year, that's I guess we'll go to the legislature next year. It's like things like that. It seems like there's an obvious need for. It's like create model ordinances for local governments and act and like provide staff support from like the Department of Commerce, like to helping local governments figure out the rules for this, right? That will help smooth the permitting process. We'll see how that goes. I'm really interested in that as it plays out. There's some other, I think there's like the MSRC or MRSC, the Municipal Resource Center. It has a kind of an inventory of model ordinances, but like, for ones that are like specific to Washington, the thing is like, it can't quite just like drop a generic thing in because every development code is quite different, and like the Skagit and Anacortes code are very different in their organization from other jurisdictions, and so you have to fit the rules into the frame of the place. And so it's a little more, but as far as like general policies and a lot of, like they don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to figuring out like what's a good rule for, setbacks because we studied the risk of this or that, There's also these programmatic environmental impact statements that have come out for geothermal, for hydrogen, for solar and transmission, I think they're doing. Maybe I could, it kind of depends on the thing, but we can look at other examples. But when it comes to like where the most important thing is like where it should go and where it shouldn't go, which really depends on a lot of specific, unique circumstances of this place that you can't really copy from anywhere else.
These folks probably know you. Who is Resources and who funds you?
Oh, okay. So we're a nonprofit organization that primarily runs on donations and grant funding, but from foundations primarily. We have a number of education and advocacy programs, but we operate a restore that salvages reusable building materials from the landfill.
I just saw a bench of yours up in Bellingham at City Hall.
Oh yeah. We're kind of like the go-to, hippie Home Depot around town in Bellingham to get a really good deal on this or that. That really just funds itself, the operation of diverting waste. It doesn't really fund the programs. But we have a community of supporters, some in Skagit, mostly in Whatcom. And we can only really work on what we're funded to do. We have definitely struggled with budget issues And we don't rely on federal funding, so that's not gonna really impact it, but we did lose an AmeriCorps position because they eliminated the entire AmeriCorps program.
Boo.
But we were thankfully able to bring that person on staff because another person left so that they could, you know, pay their bills, and they're great, so, because AmeriCorps doesn't really pay much anyway.
Thank you.
Question, there's a number of covenants that have been placed on different development tracts in the city of Anacortes that restrict the density that's allowable under the new state requirements, so like accessory dwelling units. Is there any action underway to start trying to lift some of those covenants so those higher densities can go forward?
Tough one, yeah. I'm not well versed in that area of law with restrictive covenants. Because I think that's something that's been litigated a bit, hasn't it? Because it's this interesting area that's outside of municipal code, but is embedded in property rights, which are such a foundation of, you know, in Washington and America, right? I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah. But yeah, the property rights are in the Constitution. I think maybe there's something about covenants that relates to that in case law. Yeah.
That would be something that came up in the, not just the comprehensive plan, when Carolyn and Moulton and Ryan Walters were here, they talked about density, and that's a whole other world of topics. But I think one of the things that a really good takeaway is that we have power to do stuff, and I think we need to take that and become involved in the many different areas that are happening that are really personal to you, whether it's environmental, whether it's a comprehensive plan, whether it's climate. There's so many different things happening, and we can be really active. And the other thing is to think about young people as well. I mean, they're active in other ways. They may be active in their schools. They may be active in other organizations that we're not involved in because we're just not anymore involved in those things. So we shouldn't be despondent because they don't come to our meetings. They may be at a PTA meeting or doing other things because they have children and families, or they're home. And I think if any of us have children in the past, we have to remember what we had energy and time to do. So I feel that the young people are doing things, so they're just not seeing them in our meetings. But thank you.
Thank you all so much for having me here.
Closing this.